Hello everybody. How you doing? And how are you? And I'm doing well here in New Zealand. You may have some extra sounds today because we've got people working up on the roof fixing something on our chimney that was making a bit of noise whenever we have a storm. So that's what may happen. We don't know. We'll see what happens. They're probably listening to me talking now because I can hear them talking through the chimney. Anyway, so how you doing? I hope you're well. And I hope that we can provide some light entertainment for your afternoon, evening, morning, middle of the night, whatever it is that it is for you. What are we doing? We are partway through A Terrible Tomboy by Angela Brazel, who is the originator, the popularizer of the English schoolgirl stories. But this particular one is not a schoolgirl story. It's about some children who are living at home and going to the local village school and the various adventures that they have round about where they live, the local village, and also the farm that they live on, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, so I better introduce myself if you're new here. Hi, I'm Jev. I read old children's books, such as these ones here. These ones here are old children's books. Yes, one of them is almost see-through because it's green. Otherwise, you've got ones like this. This one is 125 years old and it was given to my grandmother's brother, and this other one was given to some distant relation in 1911. So that's also over 100 years old because we're now 22, so it's 111 years old. And this one is written by someone who was famous for writing adventure stories, R.M. Ballantyne. There you go. And his idea was to write adventurous books so that people could have lots of fun reading about ripping yarns of adventure, but a lot of them based in historic events, but by putting characters into an historic situation and just, sort of exploring it from there. So that's what those two are. Anyway, I read old books because those are the books that I grew up reading because they were the ones that were readily available in our house. We would get books as presents, but I mean, you get a birthday and Christmas, one each per year. Yeah, there you go. There's the hammering on the roof. Hopefully that'll be done soon. Anyway, so any other books I could get hold of, I would read. And I discovered that both my parents and my grandparents had old books that were available for the reading. Therefore, I read them. And through discovering old books, I discovered whole other worlds and different ways of seeing the world and experiencing the world because the authors were writing in from the perspective of the time that they were living in, even if they were setting their book in a different time period. It just meant that the experience was different to what it was when I was growing up, which for you guys may have been a very, very long time ago. Most of you weren't even born then. But compared with when these books were written, I'm a spring chicken. There you go. Books are great for developing in us the ability to see the world from the point of view of somebody else. It enhances our sense of empathy, being able to put ourselves in somebody else's place and understand that they are experiencing something and what it may actually seem like and feel like, which is a good way to actually help us within our societies to be a lot more considerate, kind, give people the grace when they need it, to be able to make adjustments or whatever else it is that they're dealing with. All that sort of stuff. So, enough about the books. I do have 3 tips if you are a new visitor. And I give these 3 tips each time, and I have not yet got a prompt for those that comes up on screen, but eventually I will. So, first tip is drinks, second tip is snacks, and third tip is comfort. So, always have water. Always have water handy. It helps your brain and your body to function well. So you'll see me sipping away on water, not that particular water bottle because that one tips over too easily, usually using this. So always have water handy, but also if you have another favourite drink that you really want to drink while you're listening, go and get it now while you can. I usually have a cup of coffee handy. I didn't manage to get one organised today. I may see if I can message somebody to make me one. We'll see what happens. It depends on how involved they are in watching another friend who is gaming online at the same time as when I'm reading. Um, so snacks. What do I have today? I have good old plastic cheese, and it's not the smoked cheese variety today. It's just plain old plain old plastic cheddar. Um, just because that's what I've got, and it's nice and handy, and it's kind of like a comfort food, just having something where you know exactly what it's going to be like. And there's nothing wrong with that. So while you're off getting your drinks, go and get your snacks too if you haven't already. And while you're doing that, I'm going to keep talking to everybody else who's here. I've got my cushion handy, my lovely purple cushion with the flocking on it, the lovely floral patterns all over it that makes a shh noise in my microphone. We could get into ASMR, couldn't we? Is that giving you goosebumps yet? So get yourself somewhere comfortable to sit or lie down. If it's cold where you are, go and get a blanket that you can hide underneath. Make yourself a blanket fort or a cushion fort or something like that, if that's the sort of thing that's going to help you to be in a comfortable place. And if you do have to be working while I'm reading, that's fine. There will not be a quiz after this. I jokingly reference sometimes that we will, but we don't. This is, you possibly will learn things as we go, but that's incidental. Often I will share about various things that I'm familiar with that may be something that's referenced in the story, but won't necessarily be something that you're familiar with. And I'm just going to lean into my microphone so that you can hear me a little bit better at the moment while we've got the guys up on the roof doing their work. And hopefully my microphone will pick me up better than it's picking up them. So anyway, and like I've said before, when we have bad weather, the chimney is right there. It is 2 meters or 2 yards or 6 feet or something similar to those sort of dimensions away from where I'm sitting. So when we have wind and rain, there is a lot of noise in it. And hopefully the work they're doing at the moment will help to lower some of those sound levels. We'll see what happens. We just weren't expecting them to be coming quite now this afternoon, but it's lovely to have the work done. So we've had drinks, snacks and comfort. And if you are working, if you are doing homework, if you are studying, if you're writing up something that you need to do, doing the accounts, whatever, something where you are having to do a job, your hands are involved, your eyes are involved, but your brain is at a bit of a loose end and you want something to think about, then you're most welcome to use this as your way of keeping your brain occupied, to keep just give yourself something to think about while you're doing the repetitive or mundane things that you need to do. It's not unusual for us to have that. I can hear someone stomping about on the roof, can you? I might just keep leaning into the microphone a little bit for a while. And hopefully it will change a little soon. Oh, and I am just going to make sure, I'm going to make sure that you can chat if you would like to chat. Sorry about that. I just realised I hadn't turned on the chat function for you and how you can chat. So I will also turn on the jigsaw puzzle, so anyone who wants to do the jigsaw puzzle can do the jigsaw puzzle. And it's not a picture I've given you before, as far as I know, and you're most welcome to do it. If you type !jigsaw or !puzzle, no capitals, no spaces, no other punctuation, if you type that into the chat, it will give you the invite link to be able to play that in the browser of the device that you're using at the moment while you're listening to the story. So how about we get on with it? Right, let's do it. This is A Terrible Tomboy by Angela Brazel. Ooh, that's noisy. And that noise carries through to my microphone. I can tell because I'm watching the sound bar go up and hit the maximum and then come down again. Anyway, I hope it's not deafening you too much, but I'll just move my mic closer to me for now, and we'll see how we go. Yes, it is a new sound. That's the workers on the roof cutting metal and drilling metal and fastening metal together because it's a metal chimney. So there we go. We'll start with the story, A Terrible Tomboy by Angela Brazel, and it is chapter 9, A Mountain Walk. Now, I had a quick look for the place that's referenced at the beginning of the story, and unfortunately, it seems to be another one of those made-up places rather than a real place, so I can't show it to you on the map. I thought I'd found it, and then I read a little bit further in the story and thought, no, it can't be that, because I know roughly where these people are. And where they are is on the English side of the Welsh border between Liverpool and Coventry, I think it is, which is the northern end of that border, northern half of the northern end of that border. And the place that I found is down in South Wales. No, not going to be what's happening in the story. So I can't show you on the map, but we'll see how we go and see if it sounds like it's a real place that we can do some detective work later on. And if you want to get involved with any of that sort of thing and you want to share your findings with us, then go and join the Discord server. I shall give you the link for that, just a moment. There's the link for my Discord server, and you will be able to share what you find out there to do with any of the books that we read. Any comments that are specific to any of the books we've read, put them in the actual channel for that book. And if there isn't a channel for it yet, please ask me to create one. And you can ask in the general chat channel if you do want something like that put up, and I will do so. Right, so here we go. Chapter 9, A Mountain Walk. The mountains that enfold in their wide sweep the coloured landscape round. Oh, yeah, that's right, I forgot. Each of the chapters start, I find this out every week, every reading session. Each of the chapters start with a little bit from a poem somewhere, some sort of, like what the kids would have done as a recitation at school or something like that, where they're reciting a piece of poetry. So we'll get on with that again. Chapter 9, A Mountain Walk. The mountains that enfold in their wide sweep the coloured landscape round seem groups of giant kings in purple and gold that guard the enchanted ground. There you go. Father, where are you going? Cried Peggy one morning, sliding down the banisters in her hurry to see why her father was pulling out his great fishing basket from the cupboard under the stairs. Up to Llyn, little woman. It's a Welsh spelling, and I will give it to you. L-L-Y-N, and then a gap, and then Y, and then a gap, and then G-A-E-R. And I don't know what it's meant to be pronounced like, but that's how we're saying it today, at the moment. It might be different a bit later on, we'll see, and I'll give you a comment about that sort of stuff. My pronunciations change as we go. Going up to Llyn to look after the sheep. I shall stay all night at the cottage, so you won't see me home again till tomorrow evening. Oh, father, cried Peggy, flinging her arms around his neck in her most beguiling manner. Couldn't you take Bobby and me with you this time? We have never been once yet, and you can't think how much we want to go. Now, father is landed gentry, but they have no money, and so instead of giving up the property, what he's done is he's decided he's going to be the farmer himself instead of employing someone to do it because he can't afford to, and hopefully be able to do a little bit better with putting this effort in himself, which is why he's looking after the animals on the farm. We've never been once yet, and you can't think how much we want to go. Why, my dear child, I don't know whether you could manage it. Remember, it is an 8-mile walk, and all uphill. And such a rough place when you get there. I'm afraid I should have you both crying for Aunt Helen when bedtime came. Indeed we wouldn't. We're not babies, insisted Peggy, greatly indignant at such a suggestion. We can walk quite as well as grown-up people and carry our own baskets. And now we've got sawing going on. Not metal sawing. Something else. And carry our own baskets. Oh, Daddy dear, do please take us just this once. The hut's hardly fit for a girl, said Mr. Vaughan doubtfully, beginning to relent to Peggy's coaxings. Well, you've called me a tomboy often enough, so let me be a boy for today. Oh, Auntie, do be a darling and persuade Father to say yes. Well, Aunt Helen paused on her way from the pantry to the dining room, with a dish of ham in one hand and a pound of butter in the other. Sorry. I really think they might go, she said, if you don't walk too fast for them, Robert. Now we've got a herd of elephants on the roof. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Some over there and some over there. And I wonder how much they can hear me talking to you. That's quite funny, actually. Normally I would have actually gone and set up in the spare room and had used my phone like I have when we've had really bad weather, but this just sort of all came about immediately before I was about to start. It is a bit of a laugh, isn't it? Totally different version of ASMR. There will not be goosebumps from this lot. Anyway. Right. So I really think they might go, she said, if you don't walk too fast for them, Robert. The weather has been so hot that it must be quite dry up there, so I hardly think they would catch cold in the cottage. It used to be quite a thing where people would worry about children catching cold. I remember. I hardly think they would catch cold in the cottage, but they must promise to behave properly and not to get into any mischief. I can't spare Lillian today, she's the oldest, or she might have gone to look after them. Oh, thank you. Of course we'll promise, cried Peggy, clapping her hands and flying off in the seventh heaven of joy to inform Bobby of the delightful prospect, nearly upsetting Nancy and the breakfast tray in her mad career. That means careering off. And causing that worthy girl to wish devoutly that the schools had no holidays. So this is all activities that happen during their school holidays. Mr. Vaughan owned some land high up in the mountains across the border in Wales, hence the Welsh name. He had a little rough shepherd's hut there, just sufficient to form a shelter at night time, and every now and then he would make an expedition to look after his sheep, or the tiny shaggy ponies which were turned out loose to wander almost wild upon the moors. Now, the shaggy ponies are probably what get referred to now as Welsh cobs. Let's see if we can find some pictures for these things. I am using my microphone on its shock mount, so my desk noise is not going to be as disruptive. The keyboard clacking might, but the thumping of the hitting the keys won't be as much of a problem. Oh, it's gone quiet. I wonder if they've packed up. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Right, I'm going to start typing and you can just imagine or hum or put your fingers in your ears or something like that if it's a problem. Welsh ponies. Let's see what they look like. They're probably a little bit chunkier than your average thoroughbred, I would say, just because they look a little bit like Icelandic horses, actually, to me. Save image as, and I shall put this where I can then refer to it for you and show it to you when I find the right folder, as usual. Reading, yes. Specific books, yes. Author name, yes. And then the book name. Save. Right, that one I shouldn't need to do anything more with. And then the other thing I was going to find for you was a Welsh shepherd hut. Shepherd's hut. Those all look very fancy. Let's go old shepherd's hut. what it's giving me is a lot of photos of old ones on wheels, because there are some places that they used to have a shepherd's hut where they would drag it to the next place where they were grazing the sheep, so that they could, that one's a stock photo, I can't use that, so that it could be used wherever it was needed. Now, I would say if they're up a very steep hill in the Welsh hills, that no, it wouldn't be that sort. Not a movable one, I would think. Now, I'm going to make a guess and, and say it might have been a stone one, in which case something like this might work. Let's see if we can find one that is a usable picture. It's not a stock photo. And yes, we will get back to the story in a minute. Sorry about that. And if you wish to, you may do the jigsaw puzzle. Let's see where that's normally used. No, that one's actually not in use anywhere. That's a shame. It's quite a good little picture. Save image. This is a ruined one. It's one where the roof has fallen in and it's just in the fields. Yeah, no, the other ones aren't actually relevant because they're all got wheels on the bottom of them. Or they're on a stock photo site and therefore I can't actually show it to you properly. Which is a shame because there's some quite good ones there of the stone ones. Here we go. Now, I shall find you the picture. Let's find the right place. Picture other. Find the link. And the first thing I want is the shepherd's hut. Just keep in mind that this one is an old ruined one that someone has taken a photo of. Somewhere in the British Isles. I don't know exactly where. This here. So you can see it has had a roof on it. It's not particularly big, but it's made out of just the local stone like you've got in the fields down here around it. And then it will have had timber for the frame for the roof, and then the roof would have gone this way along there, and then it would have either had stone on top of that, or if there was a slate mine nearby and it was on the farm and the farmer did slate cutting, then they might have done a slate roof, but that was usually a very expensive form of roof because it had a different sort of work involved, whereas if you're just clearing the stones out of the field and you have sort of stones that form flat slabs, you can actually do stone for the roof. We had a pub down in the village where that I used to live near in England, and part of the roof of that pub was a stone roof. And it was actually something that people used to comment on just because it was so unusual to them, because that part of England didn't usually have stone roofs. They would have slate or tile roofs. So this would not have had tiles. Tiles would have been expensive. You would have had to buy them. So it may have had a stone roof, or it may have actually just had a thatched roof of whatever the local thatching material was. So that's the roof, that's the shepherd's hut. See, that's on quite a steep hill too. So that's the sort of location I'm imagining that they're going to be having for the shepherd's hut that father is going to go up to, is planning on going and visiting. Now the horses, let's go and find the horses. These apparently are Welsh ponies. Whoops, let's make it the right size for you so you can see them. And they're quite cute. Now, Icelandic horses look, even to me, those look reasonably short. Icelandic horses technically are ponies. They are small. The height to the shoulder is not very high, but because they are the only ones that they have, and they are used the way a horse is, not a pony, they are actually called horses. That is their breed name, as they are Icelandic horses. These are not. These are Welsh ponies. They may be cobs, they may not. I don't know what the difference is. My impression was that a cob was a little bit tougher, stronger, but more muscly than your average horse or pony. Now these ones, like the Icelandic ones, have quite long manes, especially this one here, the blondie at the front. Icelandic ones have even longer ones. Their mane, if their forelock, the hair that comes down over their face from their mane can actually come right down like this. Whereas a normal horse, it only comes down to about here or here, and it gets blown away by the wind. And they look like quite impressive. I've seen them in the wild. The Icelandic ones, they're really, really cool horses. But these Welsh ponies remind me a little bit of them, although they probably are not quite as robust for the cold weather as the Icelandic ones are. Anyway, we don't need to carry on too long about those. Just finding out where the next picture is that I'm going to be using. Sorry. And then I'll carry on with the story. And now I have to unlock my iPad. It sounds like they're finished on the roof. There you go. I can sit up normally now instead of having to slump to be able to meet my microphone. I'm going to have to listen to the recording and see how loud that was. It was a lot louder than I was expecting. It really showed up on my soundbar down here. Anyway, right. Mr. Vaughan owned some land high up on the mountains across the border in Wales. That's what I was going to do. I was going to show you the very broad general area of where they live. Now, not that. That is in London, which is where the children from the amulet were. So the area we're looking for no, it wasn't Coventry, it was Oswestry. Okay, so you've got Liverpool here and you've got Oswestry here, and the border, Wales, comes down like this. So where they live is between these two because it was referenced in the book earlier on. And so it wouldn't be that hard to just go across the border, especially in that particular time period. It would have been quite an easy thing to do. I wonder if I can show you the... this is all mountainous over here. So it's quite steep. That's not quite what I was actually looking for. Let's see. There you go. That shows the texture better. They get even bigger, the mountains over here. So this up here is quite steep. And I would guess that they're somewhere around here. So here's Oswestry here. There's Liverpool up there. They were referenced, and Chester, that's another place that's well known. So they were referenced as living somewhere around here. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was somewhere around this where I'm pointing at the moment. I'll just see if I can zoom in a little bit more. Wrexham, it's not, there's the border there. But at the time of, they could actually be down around there. Doesn't really matter, too much detail. So I'm guessing that they're right between this flatter land over here. I'll get that out of the way. Over here, this is flatter. It'll still have hills, but not as significant to show in the terrain map. And then these hills over here where it starts to get steeper and steeper. So I'm guessing they live somewhere like that. And that it is, I mean, because it said it, he said it's a 7 or 8 mile hike to get there, walk to get there. We'll see how we go with the rest of the story. And I'm pretty sure that they will give us a little bit more of a description as we go along too. I'll start that whole paragraph again. Mr. Vaughan owned some land high up on the mountains across the border in Wales. He had a little rough shepherd's hut there, just sufficient to form a shelter at night time. That's good, it would be a little bit more comfortable. And every now and then he would make an expedition to look after his sheep or the tiny shaggy ponies which were turned out loose to wander almost wild upon the moors. To go with father upon one of these mountain excursions had been the dream of Peggy and Bobby's lives, so it was with very gay faces that their fishing baskets full of provisions slung over their shoulders, and old Rover trotting soberly behind, they started off on their 8-mile tramp up the hillside. So from the farm that they live on, going uphill, 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 uphill until they get to the shepherd's hut. It was such a lovely summer morning, one of those brilliant, glorious days when the world looks as if it had been newly created and came to us with a whiff of paradise about it. Down in the village, the cottage gardens were ablaze with flowers, and even old Ephraim had forgotten his rheumatism. So it's not damp weather. It's not uncomfortable to make his rheumatism painful. And crawled out to bask in the hot sunshine on the low wall and called out a friendly "Good mornin'" as the children went by, past the forge whence the cheery chink, chink of the blacksmith's hammer came mingled with the refrain of a stirring melody from a good bass voice, under the spreading yew trees of the churchyard and out through the lych gate to the old mill, where the great wheel was turning slowly round, its dripping blades gleaming bright in the sunshine, up the steep path, through the little hazelwood, scrambling over the ladder-like stile into the narrow lane that ran ever uphill towards the mountains, which loomed before them, rugged in outline and shaded in a mist of purple blue. The hedgerows had given place to stone walls now, loosely built without any mortar, and with green ferns and pennywort growing in the crevices, and forget-me-nots in the ditch below. On and up, with the great blue hills always rising higher before them, till at length even the stone walls vanished, and they were on the bare moorland, with only a slight foot-track for a road. It's something that I wasn't used to in New Zealand, but I did actually notice quite a bit in England. In the lower, flatter lands, you've got your standard paddocks, fields sort of format. So if it was in New Zealand, we would have a wire fence with fence posts, and it would have some of the strands of wire would be barbed wire and other ones would be smooth wire. In England, it's not that uncommon to have hedges along the sides of the fields to separate them. And because people don't hedge the way they used to, which is where you actually half cut and weave the branches of the hedge trees or hedge bushes together to form an impenetrable barrier where the living branches are knitted together. Because people don't actually use those skills very much these days, a lot of the hedges these days will have a wire fence alongside them. The hedge is often growing through it. And that's just to stop animals getting out, because if your hedge is not well maintained in terms of knitting it all together, animals push their way through and then they wander around whenever they want and eat all the vegetables in your garden and the flowers. So what I did notice was that at the lower levels you would have hedges, unless you had a lot of stones in your area, and then you would build a dry stone wall. But when you get into places like Scotland and Wales, where the land starts to get quite steep, quite high, and there are a lot more stones, then when you get out of the villages, out of the normal farmland, up to the higher hills, then yes, you get these stone walls where, as you're clearing the stones out of the field so that you have more grass available, they all get tossed towards the edges of the area, and then people stack them up into these walls. And someone who has great skill can build a stone wall that will last a very long time with very, very little maintenance. You do need to maintain it. If some of the stones get loose, you need to settle them back in again so it doesn't fall over. But if you do that, the stone walls can last hundreds of years, and in places they do. But then as you get even higher up, where the soil gets thinner, because you're going up these really, really high outcroppings of land, as I said, the soil gets thinner, it's eroded down further and further into the valleys, which is why the valley bottoms are often much more fertile. Those top bits there, they don't even bother with the stone walls. It's just open grazing land or open moor. In some places, like in Scotland, there'll be heather, will be one of the things that grows wild there. And the animals just forage for themselves amongst all the different things. Usually they'll stay within a general broad area, but if you go up there regularly enough and you have formed a good working relationship with your animals, when you go up there and call, they will actually start to come towards you. And otherwise you will have a sheepdog, and the dog will be sent out, or dogs, and the dog will be sent out to find the sheep and bring them back towards you. And this is how you farm with sheep in an old place like this, where you're getting free grazing, that you're not having to look after the fields because they're up on the moors and they're actually eating the things that they want to eat. It may not give them such luxurious wool or really rich meat as what you'd get if they were in a paddock or a field down by the normal farms, but you're not having to look after them the same way. always fun to see videos of them all coming back over the hills. Absolutely. It's one of the things that used to be a surprising delight. On Sunday afternoon in New Zealand, we used to have on television at the time of day on a Sunday afternoon when there was nothing to watch that you wanted to watch. Keeping in mind we only had 2 or 3 television channels. The Sunday afternoons were empty unless there was some sort of sports on that they were broadcasting. And we had a program called Country Calendar, and I've mentioned it before, and they had it was a magazine program where they would talk about various different things that were happening in the broader farming world within New Zealand. So somebody has been developing a new version of this particular aspect of an electric fence or a milking machine or a shearing handset or something like this. And all sorts of things that were news for farmers. That's why the program was put on. But also when it was the right time of year for the sheepdog competitions, everyone would go, oh, just Country Calendar on, and they've just got sheepdog trials. How boring. And then you'd sit down just because there was nothing else to do, because you had your cup of tea or coffee and you wanted to sit somewhere quietly doing nothing, and you'd start to watch. And you'd keep watching, and you couldn't tear yourself away from it. And it would be a miniature version of what you see where a whole herd of sheep come over the hill and move it's like a live river that is moving, and they go around all over the place. You get absolutely invested in it. And with the sheepdog trials, what they do is they have a certain number of sheep. I think it's something like 12. It's a large enough number to be awkward, where if the sheep decide that they want to do something different, there's enough of them that once one sheep starts doing it, the rest of them do. The flock start to move together, or they'll split into 2 groups or something, which is a challenge for the farmer when they're rounding them up. And it's a test, effectively. It's a competition to see how well you have trained your dog or your dogs to follow your commands and bring the sheep in and get them through certain barriers, and then put them into a pen, and then you close the pen. And it was fascinating watching them. And then these dour old farmers, you'd see them. And I mean, if it was anyone else, you get somewhere at the end, yeah, like anchovies swimming in groups, very hypnotic. Absolutely. Absolutely. You'd see these older farmers who were not very expressive. Now, if it was some other sort of an athletic type of a competition, you'd get to the end and someone would be cheering and pumping their fist in the air, and they'd, like if it was soccer, they'd be jumping up and hugging each other and all this sort of stuff. Sheepdog trials? No. The farmer would call the dog to him after they've completed. The dog would sit down right next to him, sit alongside him, sit to heel, and then he'd just bend down, give it a couple of pats on the shoulder and say, "That'll do." And the dog would be ecstatic because the farmer had been so generous with his praise. Because the farmer had said, "That'll do." And you'd see it, and it was wonderful just watching the responses between the dogs and the farmers and all that sort of stuff. It was fabulous, but it taught you a lot about how trainable an animal can be, and also how intelligent sheep are. They are a lot brighter than people assume they are. You watch these sheep, and you could see which one was the bright, stubborn, independent one that had decided it was going to challenge what the dog was trying to get them to do. Some sheep handle very well, other ones don't. And they are not all alike, even if they might look it that way. Anyway, we'll carry on with the story. So that's all started because I was remembering the differences between the field separations in the lower lands and then going up to the highlands where they don't actually have separate fields. It's just big open space, like common ground, where people had to take responsibility for their own animals themselves to keep them together. On and on and up, with the great blue hills always rising higher before them, till at length even the stone walls vanished, and they were on the bare moorland, with only a slight foot track for a road. Quite out of breath with scrambling after father's long strides, the children begged for mercy and sat down to rest for a few minutes and eat their lunch by the side of a little quick-running stream. "It is a good place for a halt," said father, "for it is the boundary between England and Wales. When we are over the border, we shall all be Taffies instead of John Bulls." So Taffy is a nickname for a Welshman, and John Bull is a nickname, used to be a nickname for an Englishman. The air was sweet and cool up there, delightfully refreshing after the hot climb uphill. Below them the country lay stretched out like a map, the fields looking no larger than the squares of a chessboard, and the village a pretty child's toy, by the side of the river which wound a mere silver thread along the valley. Far in the distance among the trees, the outline of the abbey rose grey against the background of soft beech trees. A little dark cloud, the only one in the whole expanse of clear blue sky, hung over it like a warning of distant danger. And father sighed as he looked, for to him it appeared as if the shadow of ruin were already creeping near and stretching a threatening hand over the old home. But Peggy and Bobby were at the very high tide of happiness. Children live so entirely in the present that so long as the existing day brings joy, they literally take no thought for the morrow. And catching their infectious spirits, Mr. Vaughan shook off his forebodings and joined in the delight of the moment, as if he were a boy once more. He hunted in the brook for sedges, captured a red admiral to grace Bobby's collection. A sedge I thought was a type of grass. I don't know why you'd hunt in the brook for one. Maybe it's a type of fish. Shall we find out? Yes, I think we should. This is confusing. I am liking the fact that so far we don't seem to have any problems with the stream today, unlike Wednesday, 2 days ago. Sedge. And do let me know how much noise you can get from my keyboard when I'm typing. Sedge is showing here as a type of plant. I wonder if it's one that grows in the edge of a creek or a river. Fixing your stream edges, plant sedges. Oh, there you go. So I'm thinking that there's a variety of them that grow on the edge of a stream. Not what I was expecting. So yes, a type of grass. Totally unexpected. I'm not quite sure why he's wading around on the stream to pick it, though. That's unusual. Oh well. Carry on. We'll get there. Right. He hunted in the brook for sedges, captured a red admiral, that's a type of butterfly, to grace Bobby's collection, filled his pockets with sweet gale and asphodel for Lillian's dried vases. So I'm guessing that sweet gale and asphodel are a type of flower. Yes, let's go and find out. It's one of those days, isn't it? Sweet gale. And it's written like gale, a wind. Bog myrtle, or a type of myrtle. Oh, okay. I didn't know that. So it's a shrubby tree which has flowers on it. I never knew. Save image and show image over here once that's saved. I'm guessing it's the same sort. We'll find out, won't we? That one there. Open and illustration. Yeah. So this looks like these are the flower buds, a little bit like catkins on hazels. And they can be a bit sticky, and these are the leaves. So something, yes, I can imagine it would be something that someone would dry, because he talks about picking these for Lillian's dried vases. Asphodel, Asphodel. I've seen the name before, but I don't know it. Okay. which is going to work well. Red hot pokers are related to them. I didn't know that. Sorry, red hot poker is a particular type of flower that it's an ornamental garden plant. It has thin, strippy sort of leaves, which have a bit of a rough edge so you don't drag your hand along them. And then it has a long stem that comes up, and then a long cluster, this sort of a shape, made out of little tubular flowers all bunched up tight together, and they are already orange as they open up. And they stay as tubes, and then at the bottom, they start opening up from the bottom and work their way up, and the bottom ones actually go more yellow. And so that's hence being called a red hot poker. Actually, I might as well show you a picture of what that looks like, the flower end of that, because it just seems like an odd one. Red hot poker. Not what I was expecting to see as an asphodel. Right, let's make this a bit bigger so it's visible. That is a red hot poker flower, and these are the leaves all sort of crumpled around. And they can grow sort of like about shoulder height, the flower heads. They grow up on these long spears. You can actually see the stem coming up to hold the... But that is not a standard asphodel. I've always assumed that these ones particularly are South African, as opposed to these other ones, which are more like this. And I shall save you a picture so that you can see what these ones look like, which would be the sort that Father was looking for, was picking. Just have to find it. There it is. These are asphodels. Now, I don't know what the leaves look like, but I can imagine these growing in sort of wildish sort of places. I can see why they're in the same plant family, but not what I was expecting. when I saw the picture of the red hot poker. So you can see this is in a rough bit of field. Those are rushes and things like that growing in the background. So that's a white asphodel. And we shall carry on. And I wake up my book again. It seems to be an educational day today. Right. So filled his pockets with sweet gale and asphodel for Lillian's dried vases, and made himself such a delightful companion that the children agreed that Father on holiday was out and out the best playmate they knew. He's probably enjoying doing things that he had done when he was a child too, and just not having to worry because they're still moving onwards, they're still getting to where they need to go to, but there's nothing more work-wise that he can do at the moment. "Come, we must be getting on," he said at last, when the last piece of bread and butter had vanished, and the remains had been scattered for the fish. "Do you see that little farm nestling in the hollow with the fir trees behind it? That is our last link with civilization. We shall find no more human habitations until we reach our hut by the lake, so we must make the most of our opportunity and buy some milk as we pass. They will lend us a can, and we can leave it as we return tomorrow." The farm proved, on a nearer acquaintance, sorry, I'm having a hard time with lots of letters in the word, to be a little one-storey dwelling built of rough stones with a roof so covered with a mass of green polypody fern as to completely hide the slate underneath. So possibly something like that building I showed you, assuming it was a shepherd's hut, but in good order. It would not have been big, but with a slate roof, and it would have been a chunkier form of slate, not the really thin ones that they use for houses in cities. And then these green plants that grow across the stones of the roof. There was no garden, only a low wall on which the milk cans and most of the family crockery seemed to be taking an airing, but a patch of potatoes and a scanty half-acre of oats lay beyond the little homestead, roughly railed off to keep out the marauding sheep. Exactly. So let's find out what it says about oats. Oats, a widely cultivated cereal grass, typical Avena sativa. typically a Venus sativa. Oats grow in places that a lot of other grain plants don't grow well. Um, Scotland and the uplands of Wales too. So where you don't necessarily get as much hot, dry sunshine, where you probably get a little bit more um, rain and different humidity levels, things like that. And so it's good to have a grain that you can grow and use, even if it's not wheat. Wheat is really quite hard work to grow well if you are not in a place that has the right conditions for it. So we'll see. Peggy, who always liked to be first and foremost, ran on before the others to ask for the milk and was greeted by a furious barking from a collie dog who guarded the doorstep, while a small, shock-headed girl peeped shyly from behind the shelter of his rough back, the rough dog. At the sight of a stranger, she fled with a howl, for visitors were almost unknown on these heights, and the child was as wild as a young rabbit. Her cry of alarm brought out a woman who kicked the dog, yelping, into the house. She's had enough of his barking, obviously, and looked at Peggy with as much curiosity as if she were the inhabitant of another world. "Please, can you let us have some milk?" asked Peggy politely. "Dim say sneg." I think that's what she said. I will see. Let's find out if this is actually Welsh. And I don't trust to the spelling that this author uses because things have been standardized a lot more since then. So we'll see. Ha! Dim say sneg. No English. There you go. And it doesn't have a voice output to be able to get it pronounced for you. No English, she's saying in Welsh. Dim say sneg. Although I have no idea if that's how it's meant to be pronounced. "Dim say sneg," replied the woman, shaking her head, which, being interpreted, means I can't speak English. I should have just kept reading. For once, Peggy was at a loss. But father soon came to the rescue, for he had picked up a little Welsh in his expeditions on the mountains. Not too surprising. And readily made the woman understand in her native tongue what they required. The little black cow with the long horns looked strange to the eyes accustomed to the large red and white cows at the abbey, but her milk seemed sweet and good, and the woman sang a song in Welsh while she milked it, to a strange, haunting kind of melody that, like most of the Celtic music, had a touch of sadness and pathos about it. Yes, now, we are used to the cattle that are in the areas that we live, and most places, because the farming is a lot more intense and therefore it is done in not such extreme hilly country, the cattle are quite large. There are varieties, there are breeds of cattle that are quite small. We just don't see them because they're not per animal. You don't get as much milk or meat from them. But if you have land that is boggy very easily, you want a smaller type of animal because they are not going to sink into the mud as much. If you have land where it's hard to grow the grass well to feed them, you actually want a smaller animal, an animal that will not grow bigger because it will be able to find enough nourishment in its local area as opposed to you having to buy in extra feed for it. Things like that. So there are particular breeds, and I can't remember. There is one that some friends had when they first bought some land, and because it wasn't the sort of cattle that they were wanting to have, they sold them. And in New Zealand, those are actually collector's items, that particular type of cattle, because you can have a cow that is a full-sized cow for its breed, and it looks like a half-grown one, but it's ideal for people who have a small piece of land, who don't have enough grass in their paddocks to be able to feed a bigger cow. And also it will produce a bit less milk, so you're not going to be quite so overwhelmed with how much milk that you are getting from the animal that you need to find a use for. It's not uncommon for people who get lifestyle blocks and get a cow to actually end up pouring away a lot of the milk because they can't use it all, and they don't want to spend all their time cheese making and butter making and things like that. Anyway, we'll carry on with what's happening here in the story. Ask her if she ever comes down to Gorswin and how they get food up here, whispered Peggy to father, anxious to be initiated into the mysteries of life among the moors. We don't go down more than once a fortnight or so for flour and groceries, was the translated reply. That makes sense. Then we bring it up on the donkey's back. Oh yes, we walk ourselves all the way. What do we live on mostly? Bread and bacon, oatmeal and potatoes and a few eggs. It's a healthy life, but terribly cold in winter. No, I've never been inside Gorswin Church. We go to a little chapel up here. A preacher walks over from Llanelly when they can spare one. Lonely? Not a bit. When you have the cows and the pigs and the hens and the children to see to, you've no time to feel lonely. Yeah, so that part of the food they will be providing for themselves. Just seeing if Llanelly is a real place. Yes, it is. Maybe we can find out where they really are. Let's have a look. Map. Turn it on. Interact. Put this over here. Just see if I spelled that correctly. Yes. There's Llanelly. Oh, there's Abergavenny. This is down south. But they're meant to be up north. Maybe it's a different one. This does not make sense because they would not be going from up here all the way down to here. The minister would not walk all of that. That's hundreds, that's like days and days and days worth walking. That would not be happening. So I don't think it's the same Llanelly. Right. She looked pleased, however, to have had an opportunity for a chat and gave them a very hearty goodbye as they took the milk can and set off again on their long tramp. When the little farm was out of sight, they seemed indeed to have left the world behind them and to be all alone among the hills. Oh, the boundless delight of those rolling miles of heather, which looked like a crimson sea spreading onwards towards the horizon, and the delicious smell of the sweet gale as they trod it underfoot. Great flocks of plovers flew before them, screaming their pee-wit, pee-wit, and here and there they roused a snipe or a woodcock. These are all birds that are often shot for meat. Sorry. Just because they are wild birds that are around. And I thought I turned off that one. Let's turn it off. Right. Carry on with reading. Oops, that was my microphone. I just bumped it because it's got bits that stick out now. Yeah, I'll show you. I showed you last time. So we've got the main microphone with its own stand, which is here, with its legs on it. Now these bits here used to sit on the desk. And so when I was typing, the thump of me hitting the keys, not the clickiness, but the thunk when it hits the bottom, the sound would go through the desk into this and then all the way up through there and into the microphone. So now it's got, you can just see those better not hold it by that, black lines coming in from the sides, like here, these ones here. That's hair ties, hair elastic, and this is sitting in these. And so what happens is when there's any noise on the base of this or through what it's sitting on, because of this being able to vibrate, the impact sound on this does not go up here and into the microphone. Very clever. So that's why it's got a little bit of bounceability to it. It's taken us a few tries to actually come up with a shape that works, but we're getting there. And those are like giant food skewers. And hair ties, giant food skewers, and a ring cut from the top of a food can to keep them spaced out far enough, and then a piece of timber that my husband had, and all held together. No, I don't actually need those ones. It's got some zip ties on the bottom of it, which were meant to be because we were going to do like a tripod shape, but it kept on pinging around and twisting and things, so we stopped doing that. But the zip ties were to stop the elastics sliding up the poles. But it works. I've already checked it out on a Zoom call today, a Zoom meeting today. Anyway, so here we are. Here and there they roused a snipe or a woodcock, while little wild ponies scampered off like the wind, indignant at having their solitude disturbed. The path ran for fully a mile over a bog, and the children had to follow very closely in father's footsteps to keep a safe track over the soft, spongy surface. Do not stray from the track when you're crossing a bog. You might never be seen again. It may look, the grasses and things may look like they're safe, but unless you know the bog, do not do it. Anyway, and if you're wondering, that thing over there, that's my bit jar. Hype cup, I think that's what it's called. So if someone follows, it drops something into it. If someone gives bits, it also drops something into it. If we get a subscription, it drops something into it. Cheers, which are bits. All sorts of things like that. Just general interactions. Drop a little icon thingy into that, almost as if it's a real object into it. Anyway, carrying on. So we've talked about the bog. Where is it? I can see it here. The path ran for fully a mile over the bog, and the children had to follow very closely in father's footsteps to keep a safe track over the soft, spongy surface, for Joe had told them dark tales of peddlers travelling from Llanhros to Gorswen, who had sunk into those treacherous brown pools and been heard of no more. Let's see if that's a real place. Okay, that one's up the north from Llanhros. That's up near Conwy, near the Isle of Anglesey. So some of the place names I think may be real ones, but not necessarily as big as the ones I'm finding online, because often you'll have, in old places, you'll have several places with the same name, but the smallest one usually won't show up on a map. So that's why I think some of the places we've looked for aren't showing up. Travelling from Llanhros to Gorswen. Llanhros. There you go, have a go at saying that one. To Gorswen, who had sunk into those treacherous brown pools and been heard of no more. Scary. At last, coming over a little rise, they saw in the distance the gleaming outline of a lake, looking like a patch of silver amongst the heather. Look, cried Mr. Vaughan, that is Llanhros. We shall be there in half an hour. This was good news to Peggy and Bobby, who were beginning to think that the fishing baskets were very heavy on their backs, and that it was the longest 8 miles they had ever imagined. So they hurried after father, who made haste now to make up for the many halts upon the road. The afternoon was wearing on. Oopsie, hang on. This is going, I don't want it to go flat. Please, no, stay open. Sorry. I didn't think to check the battery on my iPad, and it's now giving me 10% or less, and I'm going to turn off if you don't hurry up and plug me in. There, it's going. Yes, it's charging, and hopefully it's going to charge faster than what I'm going to be using it. Okay. I wish there was a way of getting it to tell me that earlier, not at 10%. To make up for the many halts upon the road, for the afternoon was wearing on, and there was very much to be done before night. Close beside the lake, on a flat piece of grass, sheltered under a high cliff, stood the shepherd's hut, a small one-roomed shanty, of rough stones piled up without either mortar or plaster, and roofed with a few tree trunks covered with turf. Turf is not just the grass tops, it's where you cut down into the soil and you get the strip of ground that has the roots that hold the grass there as well. And then you cut this and you put that wherever it's going to be. And if it's got enough dirt around it and you settle it in well and it's not too dry, then eventually that will continue to stay growing, which means that the area underneath it stays drier, but also cooler in the summer and warmer in winter. We'll see what they have to say about it. a few tree trunks covered with turf, and heather. The tiny window was hardly a foot square and had no glass in it, and a beautiful roof of parsley fern grew luxuriantly on the sill of the window, while all the crevices of the walls seemed full of lichens bound together by the crimson stems of the creeping pellitory. There's so many different plant names in this book. Father unlocked the weather-beaten door, and the children rushed in with much excitement, because they haven't been here before. Oh, good. 11%. It is increasing. They saw a low room with a raftered roof, rough whitewashed walls, and an earthen floor. That means it's just dirt for the floor. The whole of one side was occupied by a great fireplace with a chimney so wide that looking up you could see the sky above. Great there was none, and the fire must burn on the hearthstone, but a good stack of dry peat and heather stood in the ingle nook, evidently left ready for use. A table, a chair, and 2 boxes were all the furniture, while a few cups, plates, and knives, together with a frying pan, a kettle, and a pair of bellows, made up the rest of the modest establishment. "Isn't it fun?" said Peggy, putting down her heavy basket with a sigh of relief. "I should just think so," replied Bobby, roaming around to explore and wondering whether it would be possible to climb up the wide chimney and peep out through the top. To work, cried Father. "We have no time to be idle. If you want any tea, Bobby, take the kettle and fill it from the stream outside, and Peggy, you can get some of those peats and help me to light the fire." Now, peat, when you have bogs, you often have peat alongside. There's areas which are called peat bogs. Now, peat is where there had been certain mosses that grew in the bog and then eventually died off and then got compressed down by the weight of more growing on top of them. And over hundreds or thousands of years, they've built up deeper and deeper and deeper, the dead mosses, and they've been compressed together. Now, in Ireland, parts of Western Scotland, and in Wales, they used to dig peat into sort of like brick-shaped pieces where it's this brown, earthy sort of stuff, but it's not dirt, it's actually compressed dead mosses, which have changed over time after being submerged in the water all this time, and then you leave them to dry out, and then after you've stacked them and they've dried for long enough, you can actually fuel a fire with it, which is great in a place where you don't have lots of wood, lots of trees growing. It's a way of still being able to have a fire. But it can take quite a bit of work to get the fire going, because it's not like just light a match and put the match to it and it just takes off. No, it's a slow burner. And I shall find where I am on it. Peggy, you can get some of those peats and help me to light the fire. So a peat in this context is one of those bricks of peat. Father had a newspaper and a box of matches in his pocket, so with the help of the dry heather, they soon had a glowing red blaze and swung the kettle on a hook, fastened to the end of a long chain, which hung, in true Welsh fashion, from a great beam fixed across the chimney. Let's see if we can find a peat fire in here. No, I don't want one where it's just the land has caught fire. Often in Ireland referred to as turf. Oh, I found some, and I shall show it to you because it really is quite intriguing how different it is from what we're used to for fires, if you're used to lighting fires in a house, for warming the house. Obviously, we have a fireplace and we light fires because otherwise I wouldn't have a noisy chimney next to my office, would I? Yes, I'm resizing it at the moment. That's why it's looking a little bit odd the way I'm looking around the place. Here we go. And that is a peat fire. These are peats or turfs, also pronounced turves sometimes. Oh, come back. Thank you. I have no idea why it sometimes does that. I think it depends on which corner you are resizing with. So these are sort of solid compressed chunks of dead and changed by being in the swamp, by being in the bog. Uh, Moss material that becomes peat. And these are chunks of it that have been cut, stacked together, and lit, and now they have a fire. And it will keep on burning slowly for a while and produce heat. It's quite a clever system considering that there's not a lot of available resource for fires otherwise if you're up on the moors. So they've got the kettle hanging over the fire. Now, while the water boils, said Mr. Vaughan, we must go and pull heather for our beds before the dew begins to fall upon it. Indeed. Come along, my two subalterns. This is camp life, and you must learn to bivouac like true soldiers. So a subaltern is a particular kind of a rank in the army. Working underneath somebody else. Camp life, this is also a military term. Bivouac is a term for a temporary sort of camping spot and bed system, depending on how you're using it. So he's using lots of military terms, and as if this is what they're doing as they're out in the field as junior military people, learning how to do things. The hearth this night must be my bed, the bracken's curtain for my head, sang Peggy, who had been studying The Lady of the Lake at school and quoted it on all occasions. But we ought not to have a hut at all, she said. We should just wrap ourselves in our plaids and lie under the silent stars. What, did you bring your plaid with you? Like tartan fabric. Did you? Really? I prefer a roof over my head myself, said Father dryly, but if you are so anxious to taste the romantic, you may sleep in the cold outside. I'm afraid I haven't a plaidie to offer you. I'm sure the heather bed will be stunning, declared Bobby. I don't think I shall ever want sheets and nightshirts and horrid things of that sort again. I'd like to be a hunter when I grow up and always live in tents and caves and jolly places like the boys in books. It's just like the Swiss Family Robinson, only ever so much nicer, said Peggy. That's a book we haven't read yet. Ever so much nicer, said Peggy. I wish we lived up here, and then we shouldn't need to go to school and darn stockings and do all kinds of things we hate. They don't realise how much hard work there is in living off the land. They pulled great armfuls of the delicious purple heather and laid them on the floor close to the fire, for Father had said it was chilly at nights after the sun had gone down, and they would need all the warmth that they could get. The kettle was boiling noisily by this time, so the children hastened to set out the cups and plates. There was no tablecloth, but that did not matter in the least, and the absence of teaspoons was regarded as rather an advantage than otherwise. It was so quaint to sit right inside the chimney corner and smell the delicious blue peat smoke that was curling its way to the turf roof overhead, and to look out through the open doorway at the silver lake, sending gentle ripples over the little sandy beach, and always the purple waste of heather beyond, going on and on, with the mountains rising up, tier after tier, into the dim distance. There were never such appetites. Peggy poured out with a grand air as if she were officiating at some court ceremony. Aunt Helen's hard-boiled eggs and bread and butter disappeared like magic, and the little teapot was filled again and again, till there was no more water left in the kettle. Bobby, you simply must stop, said Father. Please to remember our supplies have to last us for breakfast and lunch tomorrow. If we eat up everything so fast, we shall be obliged to go hungry before we get home again. I'm guessing that some of it's the novelty. Now I am going to look after the sheep, and I shall leave you to clear away and wash up. If I bring you camping out up here, you must be my orderlies and do the work. I generally put the cups into the pool outside. All right, said Peggy and Bobby, rattling the tea things into the big fishing basket with a haste calculated to break anything but the most stout blue enamelware mug, which Aunt Helen had thoughtfully provided, and racing outside to the little stream which flowed past the cottage into the lake. The bank shelved in one place so as to form a shallow basin, and here the children tilted in their load, sitting down on the heather for a few minutes to wait until the running water had washed them clean. Take care they are not washed away into the lake, shouted Father after them, and keep up the fire while I am gone. I shall be in before dark. And he went off for a weary tramp over the hills with old Rover, following closely at his heels. I wish we could have brought Rollo, said Bobby. I don't believe he would have driven the sheep all the wrong way, in spite of what Father says. David had to tie him up in the stable so that he shouldn't follow us. Bobby has no idea what their dog would be like when actually faced with a group of sheep that are running around. Dogs do not, unless they're specifically trained to it, do not behave well when they're around animals that run. Many people think that they don't need to keep their dogs under control when they go into the park, the reserve next door, even though the sign says that you have to have your dog on a leash. Because at home, their dog is well behaved and comes when they call them. What they don't understand is if you have an animal like a duck or a chicken or a donkey or whatever that starts to move away, the dog will think, oh, this is a game, we're playing chasey, and start chasing. And then get in trouble because when dogs catch, they catch with their teeth and not always gently. Just a tip, if you have a dog, don't leave it uncontrolled. And don't assume that it means well and that it will be gentle, unless you have it specifically trained with whatever it is that's around, with whatever that wildlife is. I know he'll miss us dreadfully, poor darling, said Peggy. I hope Lillian won't forget to give him his biscuit tonight. I asked Nancy to remember Prickles, and Joe promised to feed the rabbits, and if Jack doesn't get his supper, he'll scold so dreadfully outside the kitchen door that someone is sure to hear him. Oh, Bobby, I saw a fish in the pool just then. I have 2 pins in my jacket and a long piece of string in my pocket. Don't you think we could make hooks and lines and catch some to surprise Father when he comes back? There are lots of worms in the bank. Oh no, I hope that they're keeping an eye on the crockery. The tea things were hastily collected from the stream, yay, and the amateur anglers set to work with much enthusiasm but no success, for the fish absolutely declined to bite, in spite of the tempting bait, and lay sulkily under the stones at the bottom of the pool. It was growing quite dark before Father returned. Exactly, the fire, though, that's what I was worried about. It was growing quite dark, though, before Father returned, and I think, though neither of them would have confessed it, the children were both rather relieved to hear his cheery whistle outside the door, for it was just a little eerie, sitting by the peat fire in that lonely cottage, without a sound to break the vast silence, and the knowledge that the nearest human habitation lay fully 3 miles away. And Bobby had already asked Peggy if she believed in ghosts, and whether it was true that what Joe had told him, that the lights you sometimes see at night hovering over a bog are the souls of children who have never been baptized. And though Peggy had professed to laugh at the supernatural, she did not feel quite so brave as she pretended, and found little cold shivers stealing down her back when the wind rose suddenly and began to wail around the cottage like a hungry creature waiting to be let in. Yes, when you're up on the moors, there is nothing to stop the wind blowing. There are not lots of trees and not hill shapes to change the wind and slow it down, and it can get quite windy up on the moors, as those of us who have read The Secret Garden will remember from the introduction when they're first arriving, and also one of the times when she's stuck... Sorry, just bumped the microphone stand. When she's stuck inside the house because the weather is bad, because it's the Yorkshire moors that the house is set in. So yes, a lot of wind, quite harsh. I don't know what you young folk are, said Mr. Vaughan, but I'm dog-tired, and we had better go to bed, for I want to be up with the sun tomorrow. The children were disposed to agree with him, so simply pulling off their boots, they lay down in their clothes on the piles of fragrant heather, while Father threw thick bundles of it over them to serve instead of blankets. Heather makes one of the most delicious beds in the world. It is so soft and yet so springy, and the purple blossom smells so sweet that one could scarcely wish to lie easier. Father and Bobby were asleep in 2 minutes, but Peggy lay awake for a long time, watching the shadows of the peat fire flicker upon the rough beams of the roof, till at length the fire and Heather merged into a dreamland kingdom, where she was walking with Rollo upon the clouds and fishing teacups out of a flowing sea below. There you go. Oh, that was cute. I think I'll give it a go for the next chapter. The dinner I'm making for tonight is not too complicated, and I shall probably have a little bit of help anyway. What was I going to say? Oh, heather. I wouldn't have expected it to be particularly comfortable. It's a short, shrubby plant. It sort of grows about this high, and it's got lots of twigs. Okay, if they think it's comfortable, cool. Let's go with that. Anyway, A Terrible Tomboy by Angela Brazel, Chapter 10, On the Moors. And sorry, if you need to rush off and get yourself something to drink, pop off to the loo, grab yourself something to eat, please do so. I'll pause a moment and have a bit of water myself and my cheese. And if you want to do the jigsaw puzzle, you're most welcome to. And if you don't want to, we'll save it for another time. Not a problem. Just need to check something over here. I'm loving the fact that this is working properly today. That's good. I don't know why I keep looking away to see what the time is. I've got it on my overlay right in front of me. The same time that you can see, except that you're seeing it slightly later than what I do. I should have looked at it on Wednesday to see how much behind it was. It felt like it was like 5 minutes behind. I'm not quite sure why that was happening. It just was. Okay. Sorry, it's just there's a bird coming up and I'm not familiar with it. She talks about plants and various wildlife a lot more than I was expecting in this one. Right, I shall carry on reading. A Terrible Tomboy by Angela Brazel, On the Moors. No sound by night but the winds which blow, no sound by day but the waters flow, and the wild bird's screaming note. In spite of the best resolutions for early rising, nobody woke with the sun after all, and that luminary had plenty of time to creep round and peep in through the little window before father sprang up from his bed of heather and exclaimed that they were late, set the children to blow the peats into life again while he took his morning bath in the lake. Oh, that would have been cold. Later on, Peggy and Bobby followed his example. After sleeping all night in their clothes, the cool plunge in the clear water was delightfully refreshing. That's one name for it. I can think of some other ones. Having swum in cold water. Delightfully refreshing, and they sat about like mermaids on the rocks, basking in the sunshine and watching a ring ousel teaching her three big babies to fly. And here's the picture I found for you. It's a ring ousel, Ousel. I've never come across one before. So Coulson was saying, God, my dad would do the same with the small cottage we would borrow sometimes. Yeah. What is it with dads and cold water? It's bracing, meaning it's bleep, bleep, bleep cold. We'll not use the words here because this is a granny friendly channel. But yes, cold. They seem to think it was a wonderfully the word refreshing, brisk, bracing even. Oh goodness, polar plunge anyone? Nobody liked the bleeping cold. You're right, Squibble. And welcome. Great to have you here. Now, I know that both of you know each other, but I'm going to give you both a shout out anyway. So Coleslaw does various things, game-based stuff. I don't do game-based stuff. So it's a delight to have someone who's a gamer actually enjoying my reading as well. And then Squibble does art. At the moment, very highly detailed illustrations of various things. There's the rosy maple moths. I think I got that one right this time. And there's the Wizard of Oz illustrations. Yeah, no, I understand. I totally understand that, Coleslaw. Coleslaw is saying, sadly, I haven't in a while been dealing with some bad tendinitis the last few months in both arms. That is horrible when you're going through that. Hope to be back to games in the future. I hope you've got something that you can do that you enjoy, even if it's not games. But chill out with us. Hopefully we can help with the just relaxing a bit and giving your muscles and your joints and everything else time to rest and recover and do whatever it is you need to look after them. So we'll carry on with the read because otherwise I will never get there. And it's not because of you guys saying anything, it's just because I have a tendency to get distracted easily. If I didn't say it before, because I know I didn't, to those who are new or watching this later on, I have ADHD and I'm also on the autism spectrum, so I get distracted easily, but when I get distracted, I dive deep into whatever the distraction is. So there you go. It's a great opportunity for learning things along the way, but we'll carry on with the actual story. Later, the children set the children to blow the peats into life again while he took his morning bath in the lake. And that's right, we were just after this bit. Later on, Peggy and Bobby followed his example. After sleeping all night in their clothes, the cool plunge in the clear water was delightfully refreshing, and they sat about like mermaids on the rocks, basking in the sunshine and watching a ring ousel, teaching her three big babies to fly, till Father called out that if they did not hurry up and come in at once, he should eat all the breakfast before they arrived. That's a good motivator. It was real fun, frying rashers of bacon over the fire, especially when Peggy nearly upset the pan in her excitement, and Bobby absent-mindedly sat upon the teapot, which he had put to keep warm among the peats. I'm afraid poor father had rather a distracting meal, but he cheerfully ate the smoky toast which the children provided, and did not even grumble when Peggy, by mistake, put 6 lumps of sugar into his tea. Rover and I must be off to work again this morning, he said, taking a shepherd's crook that lay in the corner of the room and calling the old dog from the fireside. You youngsters had better play about near the cottage. Don't go wandering all round the lake or you'll get so tired you won't be able to walk home this afternoon. That's a really good point, actually. Left alone, the children began to busy themselves with what the Americans call chores. First of all, the breakfast things had to be cleared away and carried down to the stream, but to Peggy's dismay, the greasy bacon plates utterly refused to wash clean. However long they were left to soak in the pool and came up in the same smeary condition in which she had put them in, because she hadn't understood about the fact that fat is not water-soluble. She hasn't got to that level of scientific understanding yet. Whatever shall we do with them? We can't leave them dirty like this, she exclaimed, feeling as anxious for the credit of the establishment as any full-grown housekeeper. Tilt them up in a row against the cottage wall and pour a kettle full of boiling water over them, said practical Bobby, who generally had some suggestion to offer. I do not know what Nancy would have thought of such a method of washing up, but it answered splendidly all the same. It's the heat. For the greasy water drained away into the grass and the fresh breeze dried the plates without any need of a towel, and Peggy even managed to clean out the frying pan with the help of some fern leaves and a wisp of grass, an achievement of which she felt quite proud. We can't make our beds, she said, because there's nothing to make, but we'll pile the heather up with the rest of the peat in the chimney corner, and it will do to light the fire with next time. I mean to ask Father to bring us now whenever he comes up. They managed to construct a broom from some of the longest pieces of heather and swept the crumbs neatly out at the front door. They hung up the frying pan, the kettle, and the bellows in their accustomed places, and stacked the cups and plates in the old box which served as a cupboard. "Doesn't it look nice?" said Peggy, gazing round with much satisfaction on their handiwork. Excuse me. "Doesn't it look nice?" said Peggy, gazing round with much satisfaction on their handiwork. "If only we could stay up here a good long time, we'd bring lots of things from home and paint pictures for the walls and put them in cork frames, and I really believe if I tried I could make up one of those hearth rugs out of little scraps of cloth, all pinched up and sewn on like Nancy made last winter for her sister's wedding present." "Oh, bother the cottage," said Bobby, who, boy-like, soon tired of domestic duties. "Let's go out and look for whinberries. There ought to be heaps of them round there by the lake." Oh dear, oh dear. Disaster is coming, I think. Whinberries. They appear to be related to blueberries. I'm just seeing, or bilberry is another thing that's in the same family. Not whins, that's gorse, that's WHINS. Let's see why it's showing me bilberries. Common names. The name bilberry appears to have a Scandinavian origin, possibly from as early as 1577, being similar to the Danish word øl or for whortleberry, with the addition of berry. In Scandinavian languages, bilberries have names that translate to blueberry. Blæber in Swedish and blæber in Danish and Norwegian. The bilberry, especially that particular version, is also known by a number of other names, including blayberry in Scottish and Northern English regional dialects and the Scots language, whortleberry in southern England, and whymberry or whinberry in Derbyshire, Lancashire, along the Anglo-Welsh border, and South Wales, among other places. There you go. Bilberry. And you can look them up for yourself to see pictures. They're just a European version of a blueberry. And look for whinberries. There ought to be heaps of them round there by the lake. Peggy was more than willing, and relinquishing her schemes of household improvement to hunt up the milk can as a handy receptacle, followed him out into the sunshine to search among the heather for the little low-growing red-leaved shrubs with their crop of small purple berries. Now, I've been to Norway and Iceland, mainly to Iceland. I spent a week and a half, 2 weeks there a few years ago, and we went up in the northwest, me and a friend, and there's a place we stayed where they had a little wee track that went across the rocky hill behind the hotel that we were staying in, and we were just having a bit of a wander to have a look round, and they have a similar plant growing there. In fact, it's one that was on one of their stamps at the time, and it has these reddish leaves at the tips of the branches. They have reddish leaves, and then they get a bit greener as they go down. That's sort of a rusty red colour, and then they have these purpley blue berries on them, and we had been told that they were okay, so we helped ourselves and tried them out, and slightly tart, but yeah, I can see why people would pick them and make jam out of them and things like that. It was quite neat actually finding them in the wild instead of having to go and look at a supermarket or a fruit and veg shop or something. But the blackbirds and the ring osels had been before them, so it took a long time to fill the can, especially as a good deal of the fruit found its way into the children's mouths, leaving them with such purple lips and stained fingers that they resembled the babes in the wood. "I say, Peggy," cried Bobby, suddenly stooping down to examine more closely the grassy bank where he was sitting. "There's a whole swarm of bees keeps coming in and out of this hole." "No, don't, Bobby, please." Peggy came hurrying up in great excitement, tripping as usual over her dangling boot lace. "It's a wild bee's nest. I expect the bank is full of honey. Oh, wouldn't it be fun to dig it out?" "I'm sure we could do it first rate," But won't they all go for us when we start laying into their hive? We must smoke them out first, like the people do in the village when they only have those straw hives. We'll bring some dry heather and light a fire so the smoke will send them to sleep, and then we can get the honey as easy as anything. I remember just how Mrs. Davis does it." Peggy spoke as if she knew all about it, though really she had never seen any honey taken in her life, but she was a young lady who had much confidence in her own powers, and Bobby was so accustomed to follow her lead that he offered no further objections. They went back to the cottage for the matches and a supply of dry heather, which they arranged in a circle round the nest. I do hope that the ground is not dried peat. Remember I said I was looking for a peat fire picture? And then I said not like that? I hope that's not what we're going to be seeing in a minute. Which they arranged in a circle round the nest. "You stand ready with the matches," commanded Peggy, "and when I say now—" Well done, Scribble. "When I say now, strike a light." Yep, both of those. I don't know why Jigsaw doesn't work. Puzzle did. It gave you the command. Maybe just because of how soon it was afterwards. It looks like it's given you the right link. I shall check. Well, it'll be the same as the one I look at here, so I'm not quite sure why I'm checking, but yeah, whatever. Give that a go. Yay, you're in. Good. I'm thinking it only gave the link once because the command was put in fairly close together and it's usually got a time delay on it, so if it gets repeated, it doesn't double up. Anyway, doesn't matter. And when I say now, strike a light. Then as the smoke goes up, I shall poke a stick into the hole and you'll see they'll all fly out and tumble down asleep. Go for it. Be excited about the jigsaws. Obediently, Bobby stood at attention, match in hand. "Now!" cried Peggy, breathlessly. Up went the smoke. Note, up. Up went the smoke, the heather catching fire at once. In went the stick, and out came the bees in an angry swarm. But something had gone wrong in the calculations, for instead of falling stupefied to the grass, they flew unharmed through the smoke and fell upon their tormentors with a buzz of indignation. Away fled the children, racing over the moor as if the Furies were at their heels. They were both capital runners, having had plenty of practice at cricket and rounders, but I do not think they ever ran so fast in their lives as when they were chased by the bees. They had just reached the side of a little incline when Peggy's bootlace, which she had neglected to fasten all morning, tripped her up, and over she went, rolling into a prickly gorse bush, while Bobby, who was so close behind that he could not stop himself, fell over her and collapsed into a boggy hollow where he lay panting for breath until Peggy picked herself up and hauled him out. "Oh, you are a mess," she cried, trying to wipe the mud off his coat with her pocket handkerchief and getting almost as grimy as he was in the process. "I'm half stinged up," moaned poor Bobby. "I've a great place on my cheek, and just look at my hands," stretching out the wounded members for sympathy. "They've stung me all round the back of my neck," said Peggy. "I expect it'll hurt ever so when it begins to swell. We'd best go and bathe the places in the lake." The water relieved the smart considerably, and Peggy happily remembered she had a parcel of biscuits in her pockets, pulled them out, and suggested some lunch, for Bobby was looking doleful and injured and inclined to cast aspersions upon her knowledge of beekeeping. There were 3 apiece, all thick arrowroot biscuits, and I grieve to say this ill-behaved pair had a competition as to which could finish them the quickest. Arrowroot biscuits, we have them in New Zealand, and I love them. They're very, very plain, very, very plain, but somehow very soothing. I'm not sure if you have something similar like that wherever you are, but look them up. Not cookies, they're biscuits, definitely. The English type of biscuit, not the North American type of biscuit. Dry biscuits are choky things, and it is not very easy to eat 3 off on end in record time without drinking. "I've won," declared Bobby in triumph. hurriedly swallowing the last morsel and scooping up a delicious draught of water to wash it down. "Yes, but you simply bolted your last. You want Miss Wilkins here to teach you manners. What a dear little fat dot she was. I wish we could come across her again." "She's gone home. I saw her the day before yesterday in a carriage with a lady and gentleman and a lot of boxes, and Mrs. Price at the post office said she'd heard Mr. Somebody Wilkins was a very great artist in London and had pictures in the Royal something or other," explained Bobby lucidly. "Was it the Royal Academy? I'm not quite sure how we went from bees and biscuit eating competitions to talking about the Wilkinses. But anyway, I believe it was, but I thought an academy meant a school." "So it does sometimes, but I know the academy is a place where people go to see pictures because Maud Middleton told me she had her portrait there last year." "Talking of Maud, we've never seen anything of Mr. Neville since that party. I wish he would come over to Gorswin." "So do I. He was a stunning chap. He could bowl better than the captain of our 11. Why don't Father and Aunt Helen write and ask him?" "I don't know. Asked Aunt Helen, but she was so funny and queer over it and wouldn't talk about him at all. I can't imagine why." "We can. We're adults." "Oh, Bobby, look what I found. A clump of real white heather. Isn't that lucky? The first I've ever seen. I shall take it home for Aunt Helen. She'll be so pleased." "Joe says it means a wedding if you give it to anybody, and if you find it in 3 places, you'll be married 3 times. "No, I don't want to hunt for any, thank you. It's girl stuff. I aren't going to bother with marrying when I grow up. I mean to be a pirate and live in a ship with a black flag and a lot of jolly fellows with pistols and cutlasses, and we'll overhaul every merchantman we see and string the sailors up from the yardarm." And the future buccaneer swung his legs over the rock and put on a cutthroat expression, strangely at variance with his cherubic cast of countenance. "Huh, you're a silly little boy," said Peggy scornfully, forgetting that only last week she had regarded the adventures in Treasure Island as the beau ideal of earthly bliss. "There are no such things as pirates now, so you couldn't be one, and I believe you'd be scared of pistols too, if they were loaded." Much offended at these remarks, Bobby stalked away in such aggrieved majesty that, as the best means to restore peace, Peggy suggested that they should walk on to a larger stream which emptied itself into the lake about half a mile lower down. "Oh, they're going to be so tired by the time Dad gets back." Luckily, Bobby's ill humours were of a short-lived nature, and after a few minutes of cutting silence, he volunteered the rather ambiguous remark that there were lots of things a fellow could do when he grew up anyhow, and was his smiling self again. The new stream proved highly attractive. It was one of those noisy, rushing mountain torrents, brown with flowing over the peat, and full of great moss-grown boulders with smooth round stones between. Have you ever seen that sort of a creek or a stream? The water is clear, but it's brown tinted. It's like really, really thin Coke or something like that. Really, really thin tea where you can see through it. But the water that you're seeing, the liquid that you're seeing through has this brown tinge to it. It's not mud. It's just that it's been stained by the peat that it's going through. Brown with flowing over the peat and full of great moss-grown boulders with smooth round stones between. There were foaming cataracts here and there among the rocks, just like Niagara on a small scale. And there were dear little quiet pools at the edges where the still water was overhung by ferns and rushes that sheltered caddis worms and boat flies and whirligig water beetles and all sorts of other delights for the collection. The children promptly pulled off their shoes and stockings and paddled in the brown water like a couple of ducks. Peggy tied her boots together by the laces and, putting her stockings inside, slung them over her back in true fisher boy fashion, while she sat dabbling her feet in a waterfall and watching Bobby's frantic efforts to catch a dragonfly. "Oh, Peg, come quick! I believe I have him under my hat!" shouted the enthusiastic collector, lying flat among the reeds on a grassy bank. Peggy jumped up in a hurry and splashed her way to the rescue, but the smooth round stones were slippery and seemed to slide away from under her feet. She gave a desperate clutch at a willow stump on the bank to save herself from falling, and somehow or other in the struggle her bootlace broke, and away went the boots, sailing gaily down the stream, over the waterfall, and into the depths of the lake. Before their astonished owner had even realised their loss, naturally, to secure the dragonfly and pin him on Bobby's hat was the first consideration, because that's the thing that you did in those days. We don't these days. And by the time the missing boots were thought of, they had utterly disappeared, and though the children searched for fully half an hour down the stream and on the bank of the lake, they were not to be found. "I'm afraid it's no use," said Peggy at last. "They must have gone down into a hole or been washed right into the middle of the lake. Someone will fish them out in a few 100 years hence and put them into a museum as great treasures. Well, it can't be helped, I suppose. I shall have to walk home without them." Pretending to look as if she did not care, though really the prospect of a scolding from father and the further explanations with Aunt Helen on her return made her somewhat uneasy. With spirits slightly she wended her way back to the cottage, trying to think it did not hurt to walk on the scrubby heather stems, and privately wondering whether Scottish children's toes were made of different material to her own. Yeah, she's used to wearing boots or shoes. If you are used to being in bare feet, and that's the sort of ground that you normally run around on, your feet will toughen and you'll be unbothered by that sort of thing. But if you're not used to it, it can be quite uncomfortable. Mr. Vaughan came home at 1 o'clock, having counted the sheep to his satisfaction and found none missing. "I'm as hungry as a hunter," he announced. "We must eat up everything that's left. It won't do to carry anything back in our baskets. Is the kettle boiling? Come on, Peggy, child, put on your shoes and stockings. You look like the picture of an Irish peasant girl." Peggy had certainly expected a lecture when she made the painful confession that her footgear was at the bottom of the lake. But, to her great relief, father took it all as a joke, and laughed so heartily that he quite forgot to scold her. "But you can't walk 8 miles home over a rough road with bare feet," he exclaimed, the practical side of the question suddenly striking him. "And I certainly don't feel equal to carrying you. We must manage to make you a pair of sandals of some kind. I suppose I shall have to sacrifice my shooting gaiters." And he divested himself of his leather leggings with rueful reluctance. So shooting gaiters are something that you wear over the outside of your socks, and if you're wearing trousers that go from your knee down to cover the top of your boots to stop things scratching your ankles and getting into your boots. And they would be leather in this case, because then they're protecting the legs against twiggy bits of heather and gorse and all sorts of things that you're walking through, so you don't actually end up with very uncomfortable legs with scratches and scrapes and pokes. He divested himself of his leather leggings with rueful reluctance. "Now put your foot down upon that, and I will draw a line around it. Then if I cut it out with my penknife, it will make quite a good sole, enough to save you from the stones at any rate." Peggy sat on the box while father tied on the improvised sandals with her pocket handkerchief and Bobby's. They were certainly ingenious, though hardly elegant, and it did not comfort her very much to be told that she would be taken for a wounded soldier limping back from the wars. Indeed, father made such fun of her that she grew quite indignant, and began to think she would really rather have been scolded a little than so very much laughed at. Peggy never forgot that walk home. The sandals were anything but comfortable, and her feet hurt dreadfully on the stones, while every gorse bush she passed seemed to be stretching out spiky fingers to scratch her bare legs. She was tired after her morning's adventures on the moors, and the 8 miles seemed to lengthen out to an interminable vista, in spite of the way being downhill. Sundry bumps and bruises, which she had never noticed at the time, began to ache now, and the bee stings on her neck smarted until she hardly knew how to bear the pain. Poor Bobby was in a scarcely better plight, and to add to their misery, a rain cloud, blowing over from the west, broke on the mountain top and drenched them almost to the skin. Mr. Vaughan was in such haste to get home before post time that he hurried them on, quite forgetting how much shorter their legs were than his own, and he refused to listen to any excuses for sitting down and resting, which, considering their wet condition, was perhaps just as well. A more draggled and disreputable looking pair of children it would have been impossible to find. Bobby's sailor suit was all stained with mud where he had fallen into the bog, and smears of the same material seemed to have distributed themselves over his chubby face. There were several rents or tears in his stockings, while the brim and crown of his straw hat had parted company, showing his crop of brown curls through the gap between. So his straw hat is here, and the top part of it's here, but there's a gap. It's meant to be attached along there. Oh dear. Next time they go up camping with father up onto the moors, they will be sent out in their roughest, oldest clothes, I think. As for Peggy, a young gypsy tramp would have looked more respectable, for the brown holland dress, which had started out stiff and clean yesterday morning, was smeared with whinberry juice, black smudges from the kettle, and green stains from the mossy stones in the stream, and clung around her bare legs in damp, clammy folds, while the drenching rain had reduced the poppies in her hat to a scarlet pulp. They were probably out of paper, which dripped down in crimson tears upon her cheek. The sun, shining out brilliantly as they reached civilization once more, seemed to make the forlorn plight of the wayfarers look worse than ever, if there had been any possible way home except through the village. I think Peggy would have begged father to take it, and she wished that, like Lady Godiva, she could have shut the people up in their cottages until she had passed by. I know they'll all stand and stare at my bare legs and queer sandals, she groaned. Those horrid, rude Watkin boys are sure to see me and call names next time when father's not there, and Mrs. Price will come fussing out of the post office to ask if there has been an accident. She always wants to poke her nose into everything. The Watkin boys, however, were away engaged in a raid for early apples in the orchards of long-suffering neighbours, while Mrs. Price was taking tea in her back parlour and indulging in such spicy gossip with her particular friend Miss Jones that the children passed by unnoticed, and Peggy began to congratulate herself that they were almost out of danger. But alas, things rarely happen as we expect in this world. They had crossed the bridge and were turning away up the lane to the Abbey when the sound of wheels was heard behind them, and in the smart carriage which rolled by, whom should Peggy recognise but the supercilious faces and elegant costumes of Phyllis and Marjorie Norton. Her cup of humiliation was filled to the brim. "And they knew me at once, I'm sure," she lamented to Lillian afterwards, "for they both looked at each other, and Phyllis laughed in that horrid sneering way she has. I know she'll tell the Middletons, and they'll think it so queer. I don't much mind Marjorie, but of all the people in this world, I simply detest Phyllis Norton." And that's the end of the chapter, and we're going to stop there. There you go. Oh my goodness. So many different adventures. Right, for those who haven't been here before and for those who haven't and forgotten, just in case you want to know, if you want to find somebody else to listen to who reads old books, then Codex is the place to go looking. Codex is a bunch of people who read old public domain books. And we have a Discord server, and we also have a Twitch team. Now, not everybody who is a reader for Codex is currently in the Twitch team, but if you go to the Discord server, and I'm just thinking I may actually need to give you a different link for the Discord server because I think that one may be wrong. I'm just checking. This one here. Copy. And I shall just adjust that slightly. Find the right one. Where's Codex, Codex, Codex? There it is. And I'll give you the adjusted link for it, because I'm pretty sure that that particular one that I gave you doesn't work. There you go. Now it should work, and I shall give it to you again. This will be the corrected version. Right, so there you go. It's got a different link in it now. That's what I wanted. The Codex server is not just for Codex readers. The Codex server is actually for anyone who's interested in old books, and also if you're interested in internet security, especially as it relates to streaming. We have a separate channel within the server called Security. I think that's what it's called. I'm just going to have a look. Security, that's the one. And you are most welcome to, even if you're not interested in following the different Codex readers, you're most welcome to join the Discord server solely for the purpose of learning about streaming security. One of our reading members actually has written up a number of different bits of information to do with how you can spot what sort of behavior is going on with your chat, whether something is a bot or not, what sort of settings you should change to actually make sure that your community stays safe from inappropriate responses and things like that can come through when people raid you or just randomly drop in. And some of the things that can happen are very unpleasant with the sort of things that people say, and others are having to hear it and listen to it just as you are. And so it's quite good to actually learn what sort of things you can do to look after your community. And what most streamers don't seem to realize is that Twitch actually holds you responsible for the health and well-being of your own community. So if you allow a lot of negative behavior in your Twitch stream, that tends to engender more negative behavior, and if it then gets escalated to the Twitch governance, you can actually lose the right to use your channel. So it's a good idea to keep an eye on the sort of behaviors that happen, but also to block bots, to ban the bots, because most of the bots that are actually turning up in people's streams are ones that either are there to steal people's information, or other things like that. Sometimes they will, anything that's there in your stream numbers, they will not, bots do not contribute to your viewership. Even though people used to think they did, they don't. And also, bots are eligible to receive gifted subs. So if somebody gifts 5 subs to your channel, you don't really want them going to bots. You want them going to your real community, your real people who are watching, as a thank you, as a reward to them for being there, being loyal and encouraging and supportive. So why let the bots have it? I mean, they don't gain anything by it. So why let them get them? So you might as well ban them. That's why sometimes you'll see me looking across at my monitor and I'll be checking something, and I will say that I'm just checking something. I'm just doing a bit of streamer housekeeping, that sort of thing. It's because I will often be looking at who's in my user list, current user list, because not everybody will chat. But also if you do those bot bans, it will mean that because some bots are set up so that they will post into your chat and they will post links to inappropriate things or things that have spam or viruses or various trojans and stuff attached to them, which then can be a real problem for your computer system and anyone else who actually follows those links. There's all sorts of things like that happen. There are other key things you'll also learn about there if you follow the security channel. Things like having a maximum number of characters as a limit in general in your chat, and how to set those. Because there's a lot of the spam bots, the ones that post spam, most of them, the length of the messages that they send are over 150 characters. So if you ban anything, if you prevent anything that's over 150 characters for general chatting, then you will stop most of that sort of chat spam coming through. where it becomes a problem for some people is that genuine chatters, uh, some of us are quite wordy, and so we will write a message that's longer than 150 characters. Two things that we as real people can do. We can learn to cut down our comment into smaller segments and post each segment, or you as a streamer can give them VIP status, which means that 150 character limit doesn't apply to them. Things like that. There's a whole lot of things there. So it's really worth joining the Codex server, agree to the rules, introduce yourself, say where you've come from if you want to. I'm quite happy for you to say that, you came from my stream. But then definitely follow the security channel. Now, some of it may not make sense when you first read through it. Just read through it, have a look at your Twitch channel, how it's set up, read through it again, do some other things, come back to it another time and read through it again, and also ask questions about it, learn about it. And I'm quite happy to talk about this when I know I've got people who are watching my stream who are not streamers, because I'd rather that they knew that we are actually working to take care of our community. We are working to make sure that places stay safe and healthy, that it's granny safe. Yeah. Maybe I could put that somewhere in my information. I joke about my channel with some of the other readers, because some of them read some stuff that's not the sort of thing that I would read, because I only read kids' books. How I joke how I stream G-rated, or these days I should say it's probably PG rated, because some of the stuff that's in older books wouldn't be considered acceptable in a G rating these days. But G-rated could be granny rated, suitable for your granny. There you go. Maybe I need to write that up somewhere. That would be quite funny, actually. G-rated for grannies. That's the one. Anyway, so yeah, do come in and join us on the Codex server, but also go the other link that's in that bit of text that popped up on the chat is our Twitch team for Codex, and if you go to that, it will show you who's the current live chat, the live streamer for our Twitch server. No, of the Codex readers who is currently live. That's what it will do. I knew it would do something useful. I have such trouble with words sometimes. It's ridiculous for someone who likes words. So currently at the moment there's me and there's David on the air, who's one of our readers. And if you are not familiar with who we are as a group, as individuals, the Codex server is a great way to get to know us. Ask people about what they do in their day-to-day lives, because we have people who are teachers, librarians, actors, voice actors, audiobook narrators in our day-to-day jobs. And then on top of that, we will read on Twitch. That's the thing that draws us all together. But a lot of our streamers actually will game as well. And there's a wide variety of games that get played. And just chatting is another thing too. So yeah, definitely come and join us. Come and join us. And I've carried on chatting just so you have enough time to finish the jigsaw puzzle. Looks like you might have a puzzle piece missing there. Yep. And then the other puzzle piece, there, found it. Wonderful, excellent. Well done on the puzzle, and it's going to tell me what that is in a moment. I need to just find this. Sheep in the road in England. Sheep is one of those words that are slightly odd because it's singular and it's plural. Speed puzzling, excellent. I tried to make it so it wasn't too complicated today. Just because it's Friday, we don't need hard, complicated ones. But it was great to have you here, great to have you all taking part in the chat, the conversation, us discovering things together. And I look forward to seeing you all again next time. No problem with waiting. I really like seeing people enjoy what we're doing. And I really, it's great to have you here. Thank you for being here too, Coleslaw. It's lovely. I really would like to look into some other possibilities for things we can do on stream, such as we do the puzzles, if there are other things that we can do on stream at the same time. So if you've got ideas for that, then drop me a note in the general chat over on my Discord server, which you guys, I think, all have access to the link for. So there you go. And I'll see you next time. Thank you very much. In the meantime, happy reading. Bye.